Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up? Appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster?
So unless you've been living under a rock, that is LA Mayor Karen Bass. There are wildfires raging throughout California at the moment, and she is the mayor of LA. And this is just another example of how absolutely incompetent the leadership of California is. It really shows you how the left does not care about people. She's a DEI mayor. There isn't a single blue state that's being run well in this country at the moment. There's a mass exodus from California anyways. Tons of people are leaving and moving to states like Texas and Idaho just because Democrats have made it unlivable to be there. They've made it terrible. And this is really the icing on the cake. This is so indicative of how awful the Democratic Party is and the left is. Over 100,000 people have been displaced by this fire so far, and she's got nothing to say. And she was on this trip to Ghana or something. I think Biden sent her to Ghana, and she's coming back from that. All the while, this fire is raging. It absolute, unbelievable mismanagement. What is the mayor of LA even doing in Ghana in the first place? Doesn't even make any sense.
No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home? Madam Mayor, let me ask you just again, have you anything to say to the citizens today as you return?
Yeah, that's the strategy. Just stonewall them. Don't say a thing. This totally doesn't look completely terrible.
Yeah, the mayor is definitely seeming and sounding out of touch.
That's an understatement. But actually it gets worse because apparently this mayor of LA has a bit of a history.
November 7, 1983. Remember this date, but first, let me introduce you to Karen Bass. Back in the 1970s, community activist Karen Bass went on at least 15 trips to Cuba, many with a group known as the Venceremos Brigade, a Marxist group started by the Castro regime to subvert American interests, weaken democracies, and spread communism around the world. Founded in 1969, the Venceremos Brigade organized trips to Cuba every year for half a century. They attracted the most radicalized and delusional segments of the American left, including overtly Maoist and pro-Soviet communist groups. In fact, a Los Angeles police investigator who infiltrated the group testified to Congress saying that to be a member of the brigade, you had to be confirmed as a Marxist-Leninist, as a brigadista, and then moving up the ranks to organizer for the Venceremos Brigade. Karen Bass visited Cuba every 6 months. Their mission? To radicalize young, impressionable American leftists in terrorist tactics and guerrilla warfare. Members of the Venceremos Brigade were even taught how to make bombs.
Jesus Christ!
Karen Bass admits, on her many pilgrimages to Cuba, she went to see Fidel Castro speak several times, even calling him charismatic, and upon his death, praised him, saying, "The passing of Commandant en Jefe is a great loss to the people of Cuba, even though the people of Cuba see him as a dictator who impoverished their island." Another group, the M19, took its belief in revolutionary anti-imperialism to extremes, violent extremes. The M19 was the first and only women-created and women-led domestic terrorist group. Since their founding in 1978, M19's tactics escalated from robbing armored trucks and abetting prison breaks to building their own explosives and carrying out terrorist bombings. From 1983 to 1984, M19 bombed an FBI office, the Israel Aircraft Industries building, the South African consulate in New York, DC's Fort McNair, and Navy Yard, which they bombed twice. But that wasn't enough for them. On the night of November 7, 1983, the M19 called the US Capitol switchboard and warned them to evacuate the building. Minutes later, the M19 bombed the north wing of the US Capitol. November 7, 2023 marks 40 years since the M19's bombing of the US Capitol. Members of the M19, like Susan Rosenberg, traveled to Cuba with and were radicalized by the Venceremos Brigade. The South Los Angeles Venceremos Brigade was led by Karen Bass, who is now mayor of Los Angeles.
I didn't actually know about M19. I hadn't heard their name until now. And not to sound corny, but I do consider myself a little bit of a history buff. I know that there's other left-wing terror groups that have existed in America in the past, like Weather Underground and the Symbionese Liberation Front, but I guess I learned a new one today. It really is astounding that someone who has a past like that is able to become mayor of one of the largest cities in the country. It just shows you how far to the left this country has moved. That she can now just be taking trips to Cuba every 6 months. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. And what's really so unbelievable here is that she cut the LA Fire Department's budget by millions. In California, a state that's already drying out. You know, all these liberals think it's because of climate change, so-called, but really it's because they've been draining their lakes to use water to water the lawns of the millions and millions of people who live there. It's an arid climate. You shouldn't have that many people.
Yeah,
but
people were not meant to habitate that part of the country. I know wants to talk about that.
Anyway, take a listen to this harrowing testimony about the mismanagement and what's going on in California right now.
We ran out of water in the first tank at about 4:45 p.m. yesterday. We ran out of water in the second tank about 8:30 p.m. and the third tank about 3 a.m. this morning. Those tanks help with the pressure on the fire hydrants and the hills of Palisades. And because we were pushing so much water in our trunk line, and so much water was being used before it can get to the tanks, we were not able to fill the tanks fast enough. So the consumption of water was faster than we can provide water in our trunk line. So I want to make sure that you understand there's water on the trunk line. It just cannot get up the hill because we cannot fill the tanks fast enough.
What is the number of hydrants that could not get water because of these pressure issues? What percentage of the system in Pacific Palisades wasn't getting service at that point?
We were trying to keep water at all altitudes on the Palisades, and I think about 3 in the morning, that's when the hydrants went dry above the Brentwood area. We are able to push water on that trunk line on the east side of that. And we have some water on higher elevations, 16 to 18,000, but at 3,000, at 3 a.m., all of the fire hydrants went dry in the Palisades. What are we doing now? We're sending about 20 water tanks for our construction crews full of water to support the fire department. We identify other areas in our system where our tankers can refill. It takes about 30 minutes to refill about 4,000 gallons of water, and we're constantly moving that water to the fire department to get them as much water as we can. For the people on zip code 90272, because we're pushing the water system so hard, our water quality is decreasing. So we're gonna be issuing a boil water notice this morning, and that will extend for about 48 hours. The water quality is low. We have a lot of ash in the system. And so please, if you're gonna be drinking water, you need to boil the water. Those boil waters will continue to increase as the system starts restoring.
And you know what? It gets even richer. Outraged LA residents are already calling for the immediate recall of Mayor Karen Bass over the wildfires, over the way she has been responding to these wildfires. And there's a petition that's already hit over 50,000 signatures. Angry Angelinos want to fillet this bass. More than 50,000 outraged Los Angeles residents demand the ouster of lefty Mayor Karen Bass in a new petition, ripping her gross mismanagement in her disastrous response to the devastating wildfires ravaging the city. Quote, "We urgently call for the immediate recall of Bass due to her gross mismanagement and failure to effectively respond to the devastating 2025 wildfires in and around the city," end quote, reads the change.org petition created Wednesday, which has amassed 56,000 signatures by Saturday morning. Bass was 7,400 miles away in Africa at the inauguration of Ghana's president as flames began engulfing the city of Los Angeles. Quote, "Families have been displaced, homes destroyed, and livelihoods shattered. Yet Mayor Bass has been absent from the front lines, choosing to travel abroad while her constituents suffer," end quote, reads the petition, which calls for, quote, "a full, transparent investigation into the failures in disaster preparedness, response, and resource allocation that left LA vulnerable," end quote. Bass slashed $17.6 million from the Los Angeles Fire Department's budget for the 2024 to 2025 fiscal year, which critics blasted as, quote, "a bad call," end quote. Nearly 130,000 Californians have been under evacuation orders, and 11 people have perished because of these fires. President-elect Trump has also called out California Governor Gavin Newsom for totally mishandling the situation. Gavin Newsom has responded in a predictable way, totally taking no accountability whatsoever and just pointing the finger back at Trump. But I mean, Gavin Newsom is the one who's like pouring like millions of tons of fresh water out into the Pacific Ocean. They have all these dumb environmental regulations in California, which, aside from the fact that they got rid of the facilities to store the water, to put out the fires, also get in the way of actually handling fires. Because apparently a lot of this brush, which caught fire, is supposed to be like naturally burned anyways, but in a sort of controlled way at a smaller scale. And they just haven't been doing that because of environmental regulations that they created, because they're all a bunch of left-wing tree huggers. Anyway, if you are curious what DEI looks like when applied to a fire department, just take a look at this Los Angeles Fire Department video real quick.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or, you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
He got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire. What kind of response is that? What does that even mean? This is the least reassuring thing I've ever seen. This is terrible. This is awful. Man, would you trust this lady to rescue you from a fire? You're a big 200-something pound man. You'd trust her to carry you out. That's DEI for you. That's the magic of DEI. Coming to a fire department near you, hopefully. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you really liked it, please give it a like. Share it, because that's the #1 way you can help grow this channel. Subscribe. Consider going down to the description section of the video and subbing to me on Patreon for other benefits if you really enjoyed it. And Red Channels will, of course, catch you in the next one.